Morning. Welcome to CIS 137, Class 9. Today's quote, technology is nothing. What's important is that you have a faith in people, that they're basically good and smart, and if you give them tools, they'll do wonderful things with them. So this was Steve Jobs back in 1994. And the interesting thing is, you know, at this point in Steve Jobs' career, it was after he had left Apple and he was working on uh, Next at this point. And they were concentrating on object-oriented programming, and he was bestowing the virtues of that. Uh, yeah, he did lots of good stuff. If you don't know, he basically brought the iPod along. I'm sure everyone knows that. All right, so today for the 20s, we're going to go over WebStorm and how you can use it with your development, conditional rendering in React, and backgrounds in CSS. So first, we're going to go over WebStorm. So we're going to go over setting up your project, how to do error checking, code styling, code navigation, how to use a built-in terminal, and how to set up debugging with WebStorm. So you can actually debug JavaScript just like you would Java or any other language. So let's start the first step. So we're going to start from scratch. So I'm going to open my terminal. You could do this with your bash shell too, or whatever terminal. You can even use command line or Windows command prompt for this as well. I'm going to make a demo 1 project with Create React App. A Create React App will do its thing. It sets up our initial React project with all the dependencies it needs in order to build and package itself. Which again, one day you'll have to do without Create React App, potentially. But even in a professional environment, Create React App is very useful, and then you can just, if you need to make some adjustments to the build pipeline, you can eject from Create React App's initial project, and then you can make modifications. But I mean, for our purposes, Create React App is a lifesaver. It's great. Let's go ahead and open up WebStorm to make sure we have it open. When you open WebStorm, if it's not the first time, it'll open up the last project you had opened. It's almost done. But we're going to open the project where we are creating right now. This is this project right here. It's not done yet, so we're going to wait. But when you're opening projects for the first time, or any time, what you're opening is the folder. There's no special file that IntelliJ or WebStorm has. It's really a hidden folder inside of your project folder. So you just have to open up the project folder, and then WebStorm is smart enough to open your project. All right, we're almost done here. All right. See, this yarn eject command removes this tool and copies build dependencies, configuration files, and scripts into the app directory. If you do this, you can't go back. So it's a one-way ticket. All right, let's open up the demo1 project we just started. So we navigated to the folder our project existed in, and now we just click on the folder and press open. Okay, so now we see we have the source, we have app.js, all of our projects inside of here. Now sometimes with Create React App, I believe that the setup for the JSX is happening automatically, but if not, if you get a bunch of red lines that don't make sense, that's because there's several flavors of JavaScript possible. So if you go to language and frameworks, JavaScript, and you can see the flavors you can pick from. So the default, if you just started a project directly from WebStorm, it's probably going to be ECMAScript 5.1, but we want React JSX. So React JSX lets us write JSX in our code, because JSX is not standard JavaScript. It's definitely React specific, and it has to be transpiled down to standard JavaScript. So for WebStorm to not show errors for all the JSX we're writing, we have to specify a framework here. Okay, what's next? Modify getignore file. So this getignore file will this default one provided by Create React App is pretty good, but it doesn't exclude all of the option or all the files that are created by WebStorm, for example. So this is just ignoring the node project files and some operating system files. But if we did something like, we're not going to do this yet, but if we did git status, then we would see that all of our other files are going to be checked in too. So here's what we're going to do here. We're going to go to getignore.io. So we've done this before, so I'm going to just show it again real quick. So we're going to create a getignore file that has node, WebStorm, and Mac OS, really OS X, OS 10 as Mac wants you to say, and Windows. And now we have a good getignore file we can use. So we're going to go ahead and Control A, copy all this, and Control C, copy it, and paste it into Control A to select everything and just replace everything in there. Now all these files will not exist already, so that's okay. All right, save that, and now we have a good getignore file. There's also plugins inside of WebStorm. So if you wanted the .ignore plugin, when you're inside the .getignore file, there'll be a plugin up here that says, do you want to install the .ignore plugin? And I have it installed. So that basically will give you errors or warnings based on your ignore file, and it'll do some other cool stuff for you. If you accidentally already checked in a file that you want to ignore, then that .ignore plugin will produce the git commands you need to remove those files from Git. So error checking. So this is one of the main advantages over a standard text editor. So if you're using Notepad++ or something like that to code, you wouldn't get these errors necessarily. So when I'm talking about, here's an error. So let's say we're using this logo. We're using it right here in our project. But if it did not exist, so if we commented this out, and we get a light gray error, which you can see over here and right here. It's kind of hard to see. So this is a warning. They're saying it can still work, but logo does not exist. Unresolved variable or type logo. But notice WebStorm is smart enough to figure out that logo was never imported, so there's probably an error there. So I'm going to put that back in. Next, let's say our JSX is broken. When our JSX is broken, there are errors everywhere. So you can see it says things like missing curly brace. So if you put in a curly brace, that doesn't help anything. These errors are basically side effects of the error of removing this first element. So it could be hard sometimes to find the exact error that is causing the problems, but it indicates there is an error, which is better than nothing. If you look on the right side, it shows all these red lines. So these indicate a line where there is an error. If you click on one, it'll highlight that exact line for you. So red means there's something wrong that we can't transpile our program. It's not valid. It will fail completely. And then you have warnings like this that are just basically suggestions. So the yellow underline, method can be static. So that's just saying, you could, it's just a suggestion, you could make it static render. But recommend not doing that. If it ever says something like this, then you have an option to change your component into a stateless functional component. So you could do something like function app props, and then instead of extend component, it would just return. It wouldn't even have this render. It would just return our JSX inside of here. And we don't even need the props. So if you notice, props is gray, which means it's unused. Generally, if it's not used within your code inside the method, then you don't need it. So JavaScript function calling is different from Java's in that the parameter list is really variable. So even if something called app with the props parameter, it would still call this version of the function app. There's no, it's like, what's it called, overloading that you have in Java. But that's just a 132 thing. You don't have to worry about that. This is just showing you WebStorm right now. So let's turn it back into what it started as. Okay, just Control Z my way back. All right, so now the one, code styling. So let's say your code, looks like this. It has some random spacing because we copied and pasted some things and just things don't line up at all. It'd be kind of annoying to go through and tab and make sure everything's on the right level. Well, there's an easy way to fix that. So if we go to code and then reformat code, it'll space everything out for us. It'll also do things like add new lines if necessary. So I'm going to use Command-Alt-L, and it fixed our code for us. So this will fix the current file you are in. So it's not going to go through your entire project, and then you can just save it to perpetuate the changes. So I recommend using that. Code navigation. So to navigate to a function declaration, you just have to hold down Control or Command on Mac and then click on a function call. So inside of here, we could hold down Control and we can jump to whatever. So even this path up here, we can hit any of these elements. So if we hit this div element, for example, this will bring us to some code provided by React. If we hit we hold down Control and hit app.css, we end up our CSS file. And if we want to get back quickly, we can hit this back button up here. If we want to go back to where apps.css, we can click forward. That's command bracket, command forward bracket, or Control on your Windows PC. Another great thing about this integrated development environment is you have a terminal. As terminal, you can use Git down here. So I could use Git status to see that I'm not even in a Git repository. So I can Git init to create the repository, and then I can use Git status to see all the files that are not added yet. And then I can use Git add period to add the initial batch of files. Use Git status to make sure those are all staged up. And then I can commit. Let's use -m to put a message, and then in double quotes. Always gets me. You can't use exclamation points on the command line like this. Now Git status shows nothing to commit, working tree clean. And our project is now Git enabled. You know all this, I'm just showing you again. You can also use yarn here. So we wanted to add the React router DOM. You just yarn add React router DOM. The yarn, you'll see commands for npm install on a lot of projects. That is exactly the same as yarn add. Yarn just sits on top of npm and does some version locking for you. So whenever you're installing something, if it ever says npm install, just use yarn add instead for these projects. So remote debugging. This involves a lab. So yeah, whenever we add a new file, you know, this file was added by our IDE, we can choose to include it or not. I recommend after setting up that .gitignore file, that's going to exclude the files that should not be shared. So if a file still pops up here, that means it should be shared. So let's set up remote debugging. So remote debugging lets you set up breakpoints and inspect values inside your JavaScript instead of using, well, in addition to using the developer tools in Chrome, this lets you dig in a little deeper and really step through your code line by line. So to set that up, first thing we're going to do is we're going to start our project. So we did yarn start in our terminal down there. And it's firing up our React app. Now, the first thing you need to do to support this JavaScript debugging is install a plugin on, or an extension on Chrome. So we go to extensions and get more extensions. And you can pick extensions and search for WebStorm. It'll do a search for you. So the one you want to do, I mean, this one's cool. You can open GitHub projects directly in IntelliJ, but the one you want is this JetBrains IDE support. So once you add it to Chrome, you'll get this link up here, or this extension up here. So to actually then hook up debugging, we need to add a build configuration. So click this arrow up here next to this grayed out play sign. We can add a JavaScript debug build configuration. And we can call this, you know, JS debug, whatever you want to call it. And then we're going to set the URL not to any folder. We're going to set it to HTTP localhost 3000. We're going to set our browser to Chrome. You see all the default browsers we have. And we're going to select our remote URLs of local files. That's fine. So now we have JS debug up here. If we hit a breakpoint here, if we click on the line number next to a line we want to stop on, and we hit debug up here, then you'll see this JavaScript ID support is debugging this browser. So now whenever we want to hit a breakpoint, we press refresh there, and now it jumps over to this WebStorm as soon as that breakpoint's hit. So this is before anything's rendered to the screen. So we can see the local this refers to the app class, and we can see the props that were passed in. We can see the refs, all this internal stuff. We could even, if we had local variables, so if we added some variables like that, we can see those values as well. Now those aren't going to show up immediately because our project's paused, so we need to restart our project. So we're going to press play down here. So this is resume. So now if we refresh again, we see X and Y are now considered part of the scope. So we see local variables X equals 1 and Y equals 2. This lets you really dig into any issues you may be having, especially if you have conditional rendering, which we're going to go over in a minute. It's a little advanced, but it helps out, and it's better than going to Control Command Alt I and then finding out what the variable values are in here. But X doesn't exist inside the window anymore. X only exists inside that function call, so we can't even see what the value is there. So using this command or using this console with React doesn't work that well. There's also this React Chrome developer tool that you don't need yet, but is useful. It'll show the components in a more natural fashion, so we can see, how components are nested instead of just straight HTML. So, any questions? You can even ask questions about the project or anything that's going on. All right, so let's jump on to the next section. Let's talk about conditional rendering in React. This basically means you can dynamically choose when to hide or show elements based on JavaScript values. So there's some light programming in here that we're going to be going over, which is Booleans, comparison operators, logical operators, conditional operators. We touched lightly on this last class. We're just going to dig a little bit deeper. And we're going to talk a little bit more about React Router, because that's really a conditional renderer as well. So Booleans in JavaScript. So JavaScript variables do not have a type, so there's no Boolean type. You just say, let whatever variable equal whatever value. So any variable can hold any value, and that variable can hold different values throughout its lifetime. And any of those variables can be considered true or false, depending on the value. So these are called falsy values or truthy values. Falsy values include 0, the empty string, just two double quotes or two single quotes, null, undefined, false, and NaN, which is not a number. So NaN will show up if you try to do something like 10 divided by 0. Since you can't divide numbers by 0, the result is NaN. It's not an error, it's just this value. So anything else besides -0, which is another option, everything else is truthy. So any of these values will be considered false as a Boolean. Anything else will be considered true. So I recommend checking out this JS Booleans page. So Boolean data type, is two values, true or false. But you can consider it yes or no, on or off, or true or false. You don't have to worry about this Boolean function, but this will help if you are not sure if anything is true or false. This will actually evaluate the true or false. It'll turn the truthy or falsy value into a hard true or hard false. We'll go over these comparisons later. But if we jump into one of these, try it yourselves. So see, we're dividing 10 by the letter H, which makes no sense. Try it out, and we say we're converting that value to hard true or hard false. So 10 divided by H starts off as not a number, and if we use the Boolean function, we see that falsy value is false. If we try something like 10, hit run, we change the code, we hit run, then we hit this try it button, we see 10 has a truthy value. So since it's not 0, we get true. If we put 0 in here, and we hit run, and then try it, we get false. How about if we hit string of 0, that's true. An empty string, false. So you can try out all the different options here and see how they resolve. So how can we use these in React? So in React, we can use JavaScript to control what is rendered based on a Boolean expression. And we use if statements here. So if statement takes a Boolean expression inside the parentheses, and if the expression is true, it'll execute the code inside of the if statement. If the expression is not true, it'll skip the code inside of the if statement. So it'll skip everything inside these curly braces and go on to the next line. So this is a very simple user greeting versus guest greeting. So if someone's logged in, they'll see user greeting. If someone is not logged in, then they'll see a please sign up button. So we control that down here. So we're going to be passing a is logged in attribute to the props for our component, and we can retrieve is logged in from the props inside of our component, and we say if is logged in, then we're going to show the user greeting. So we could add more props in here, to get the username and provide a link to their page, their homepage, or whatever we want to do, their member profile. But this is just going to be a simple example here. So we're going to return user greeting. So once we hit that return statement, this function exits and it returns the component up to the caller. So it's going to render the user greeting here and then display it on the root element. So right now, is logged in is set to false. So we see please sign up, which is the guest greeting. If we change this to true, and we see welcome back. So by passing in a Boolean to the props, we control what is shown inside of greeting. So that leads to comparison operators. So if we have a value that's not truthy or falsy, if we want to compare it with something, say we want to say we only want to show certain elements, we only want to show the paging element. So we want to be able to show a list, and if it has more than 10 items, we want to give the user the ability to go to the next page of 10 items, only see 10 items at a time, something like that. If we have to compare two values, we can use these comparison operators here. So if we want to say more than 10 items, we can say if items count is greater than 10, then that we could display a paging element based on that. So let me show you here. So here are the list of comparison operators. So all these take two elements and compare them to each other. So you can test if items are equal to each other. So we have a loose equals up here where it'll convert strings to numbers. And then we have a more strict equals here, which will actually require them to be the same type. So if x is 5, the number 5, it's not also the string 5. So there's a major difference between these two. I recommend sticking to the triple equal sign. This one can have unintended consequences. And then you have not equals, so you can find all items that are not equal. So for example, to test, we still have x equal to 5. So x does not equal 5, so it's false. But since x is 5, x does not equal 8, so that's true. Then we have greater than equal to, or less than or equal to. So these comparison operators are a way to test equality, to basically convert your Boolean expression to match what you're expecting for something to display. So if we go back to this conditional rendering, we could have a count in here. So we could say let x equals 5. And then we could pass in x equals 5, or x equals 5. Oh, I'm doing this completely wrong. Let's pull this out. I'm doing it inside the render. I didn't even realize that. Okay, so we have our x equals 5 outside of here, and then inside the render, we're testing if x equals 5 here. Now really, since 5 is truthy, we could just do that. But then, if we wanted to be really x equals 5, then it'll still be truthy if we had x equals 2. So we want to make sure it's exactly 5. X is not equal 5, so that this results in false. So logged in is false. So logical operators. So these logical operators let you do an inline decision to render an element or not. The most important one in this section is going to be this double ampersand, which represents and. So this compares two Boolean values from the left and the right. If both are truthy, then the result is true. So it requires both sides to be true. Otherwise, it'll be false. So if either side is false, the result is false. You could use the OR operator, which compares values to the left and right side of the OR operator, and if either of the items are true or truthy, then the result is true. And then last we have a unary operator, which means it takes one value and it's just the value to the right. And it basically flips the truthy or falsy value that may be there. So if it's true and you put a not in front of it, then not true is false. So we can use the AND operator to conditionally show elements. So this example here, we have a mailbox with unread messages, and we have messages inside of an array. So there are 3 messages inside of this array. Now inside the component, we're getting the unread messages count, or the unread messages array from props. And then right here, we're using JavaScript to conditionally display this you have unread messages length unread messages. So this gives you the length of the array, so the number of elements in the array. And we're checking here if that length is greater than 0. So this gives you a true or false. If it's true, then it'll proceed to this next H2 element. And it'll ultimately return whatever's on the right side here. So unread messages.length is greater than 0, and this H2 element. So if this is true, it'll return this element over here. If this is false, then JavaScript is smart enough to say, okay, I only need to check if one of these values is right. Both of these values need to be true in order for this to be true. So if the first one is false, then I don't even need to check the second one. I don't need to evaluate this at all. So it skips the evaluation of this and just returns false. And then false does not get rendered to the screen. So if we delete all the messages from this array, just leave it square brackets, then the messages.length will be 0. So it'll skip the rendering of this H2 element, and it'll just display hello. So it's a great way to, make sure elements don't get included by accident, or only get included when they're necessary. I recommend only using it if the next element is pretty short, and if this left side is short as well, because it could be pretty hard to read. If it gets hard to read, then you should break this out into another function call, which we'll talk about later, how to organize code like that. Another way to conditionally render something in React is using this conditional operator. This is one of the harder operators to remember how it works. But we went over this briefly last class. So this is an operator that takes 3 values. It's one of the only ternary operators there are, as they call them. The left side is going to be a Boolean expression. So this could be, comparison operator. It could be just a straight up truthy, falsy Boolean value. Whatever it is, you could use even logical operators to combine multiple Boolean values. Whatever it is, got to result in truthy or falsy. And in JavaScript, anything results in truthy or falsy. So this could be anything on this side. Then you put a question mark. And if that Boolean expression is a truthy value, the result of the entire statement will be result 1. If the Boolean expression is a falsy value, then the result will be result 2. This is a way to condense down an if statement. So it's really good for short values. So for instance, we could check this is logged in prop, and if it is true, then we could say hello. If is logged in is false, then we would say please sign in. So for example, instead of breaking this out into multiple components, we could instead return one component, and based on the is logged in, we can display a different value in here. So you can say is logged in. We're using curly braces because we're using JavaScript inside of here. Put a question mark, The first value will be welcome back, else please sign up. And just to show it's different, I'm going to change something in here. Welcome back to, please sign up to. And then we're just going to close off our H1. So now instead of using these greetings, we are using this straight up string in here. And we can still use this user greeting, guest greeting. We just put them in here. But see, now we have double H1s, so it's getting conceptualized to a bigger, to double H1 size. There's a way to, condense that if statement down into one line. But if the values are too long, if your Boolean expression side is too long, or the right side is too long, one of the result values are too long, then it becomes very jumbled and confusing. So if you look, there's so much punctuation on this line, it's hard to tell what's going on. In fact, this is even valid right here. Let's see. So this parentheses right here, not even valid. So here we're saying the first value is greater than the second val, and the first value is greater than the third value, question mark. So all this gets executed as that Boolean up here. If the first value is greater than both those values, then we're going to return this first result, which is to set the victory value equals first val name player 1. Else, if it's false, if the first value is not greater than both values, then we're going to display this loss component with value first val name player 1. This is too much for this conditional operator. It should be used for short values. So basically for strings. So if you had to do it this way, you should break this out into multiple statements by using if statements, and you could even put this evaluation here into a victory component, which could show victory or loss, or whatever you want to name that component. So a condition could go down into the component itself. So conditional operator, it's okay, but there's too many values for anything to be too long. So if it starts looking confusing, break it out. So React Router, let's go back to our WebStorm project because we just put React Router in there. So React Router allows you to conditionally show or hide elements as well. There's like just a clean way of doing all that conditional operators, but it's all based on the URL path that you're passing in. So instead of based on hard-coded Boolean expressions, we're going to do it based on the path inside the URL in the browser. So the path, again, this is the domain. This is the scheme right here, the HTTP, HTTPS. This is the domain or the host. And then everything after that, up to the question mark, is the path. So you can do things based on the question mark in React Router as well, but for our purposes, we're sticking to the path. So the path has just names and slashes, and it could have subfolders in here as well. It's best not to think of them as folders. They were folders at one point when HTML was flat, but now they're just paths, and we can analyze those paths in React. Let's do an example. So we installed React Router through Yarn in here, so we can use it. I'm going to import React. I'm going to import the browser router and the link and a route from React Router DOM. Now, in the React Router DOM, you may do browser router as router. Fine. This confuses WebStorm a little bit, because when you go to use the router, you're going to get an error that, let's do it. If I do just router, I have to wrap all my stuff that's going to have routing in it. When I do that, it highlights it yellow and says element router doesn't have required attribute history. So this is just WebStorm being not as great as it could be. It's not really respecting this alias when it's doing this code inspection, because browser router doesn't need a history element. So if you just use browser router straight up, the history element is actually HTML5's built-in history, or it'll fall back if necessary. But key is that WebStorm detects this browser router correctly. Let me use Command-Alt-L to push in my code. So get that nice indent. We get this spacing here, which is desirable. And you see we're still not using link or route. That's why they're gray up here. So we're only going to display this here if the route is the home page. The route path equals home page, which is just slash, stands for the root. And then we're going to say it has to be exact. So we could say exact equals true here, but just saying exact is a shortcut for that. So that resolves to exact equals true. So whenever you just see an attribute by itself, the value of that attribute is going to be true. So whenever we have this path, this home path, we're going to display a component. Now we don't have an extra component in here right now. We don't want to display app. That's going to be a recursive inception crasher. We're going to display the hello component, or maybe the home component. Let's display the home component. Now, the home component does not exist yet. So let's create one. We'll create a class, home extends component. Could use a stateless functional component here, but we'll do the full-blown class. And this render method is just going to return that JSX there. Instead of saying to get started, we just say hello. I like using hello in my examples, apparently. Down here we get warnings from Yarn. So Yarn does some lint checking in JavaScript, and it says link is defined but never used. So that's the same as WebStorm showing it up here. That is, when it says compile with warnings, it means it worked, but there may be some things you want to look at in your code. Okay. And our app is over here. And we see it now says hello because we are in the root path. So we put the slash in, it'll work too. It'll say hello. Slash disappears because it's not necessary to have a trailing slash. If we go to slash hello, then we lose our hello because it's looking for this exact path of the home. One more thing I want to show you in here is, once you have multiple components inside of this JS file, it could get pretty crowded in here. So we want to break this out into its own file. We can do it manually. We can go create the hello.js in here and then import it inside of our app.js, or we can let WebStorm do it for us because we are learning our tool. So we select all the code and then we right-click on it, context click. This isn't working for some reason for me. There we go. Then we do refactor, and that should pop up. And we can extract method. Let's see if this works. No, that's not going to work. All right, we got to do refactor, move, and then we can choose a. That's not going to work either. Maybe I can't do a full class in WebStorm yet. I was hoping I could. Let's just do it the old-fashioned way. If we do extract, let me try one more time. No, can't do it. Shame, I thought that definitely worked. So we're going to make a hello component. So we'll just make it hello.js. Yes, we'll add it. And this component is going to look kind of like the app.js file. It's going to have this import statement at the top. And copy that over, import React and component. And then it's going to contain this code here. So we're going to Control X that and bring this over here. Now, we may try to, so we see this, the hello component is showing up here. Element is not exported. So in order to use it inside of our app.js, we first have to, we first can import it. We have to import it based on the file inside of a directory. So we're saying // which means the current directory, and then the hello file. We don't need to put .js at the end because that's provided by us automatically in import statements. It'll look for hello.js first. So that just makes it look a little cleaner up here. Scroll down, Control, Command, click on it, we get to our hello. Now the problem is over here, even though we imported hello, we still get this error, element is not exported. So home is not defined down here. And this results in a blank page in our rendering. So look at the bottom line here, export default app. So in order to get hello outside of our outside of this file, we have to export it. Export default home. Save that, and then oh, I missed one more piece. Import hello from hello. Just because we exported it, that class name does not necessarily match up. Oh, sorry. Import home from hello. That name up there has to match here. So we could make it hello from hello, and we just have to change this to hello as well. So now that's working. Another quick way to write that is less clear. You could put the export default directly on the class up there, and that'll work as well. The general practice is to put the export default at the bottom, but if you only have one class, whatever, you can put the export default right on the class header. So again, this export default, that has to match there, but then when you import it into another file, you can rename it. This is basically an alias. So we're importing hello from the hello file. So whatever was exported, we're putting inside of this value here. and then we just use it as hello throughout our app here. So again, we can always, since we want to use the link element, let me just show you real quick how that would work. So link to slash, and then we can give it a name. As link is not inside of any route, so it's always going to show. So we see this link to home there, and if we go somewhere deeper in, and we lose that hello because we lost our exact path to home. If we click home, we can go back home. So key, capital L for link, and use to instead of href. So any questions on conditional operators or conditionally displaying items in React, conditionally rendering in React? All right, we're going to jump right ahead, going over the 20s this time. Let's jump into CSS backgrounds. This is not React specific, but we're going to do some examples in React to see how backgrounds are done there. But this is a standard CSS to display backgrounds in any element. So backgrounds, you can set the background of any element, any HTML element, to have a color, an image, or as of CSS3, a gradient color. Gradient color means a color that gradually changes to another color. So a good resource for this is W3 Schools. See, they have a background of some mountains that they've set. And we can try some code out ourselves. So if we check out this body background color light blue, it's going to change all of the content of the background to light blue. And we could change this to red, run, and we see the whole background is red. That leads to colors. How can you specify different colors? So you can specify colors by name. You know, if the color is a standard color. So let's bring this up. Or you can do it by RGB values, which is red, green, blue. Each value you can represent R. You can say between 0 and 255 for red. So 255 would be solid red, and 0 would be no red. And then you can specify how much green you want for the value between 0 and 255, and how much blue you want with the same value range. Or you can use hex values, which is the original way of displaying colors in HTML, which is basically shorthand for this RGB. And I'll show that in a second too. So here are some standard colors you can use just by name. There's actually quite a lot of them. There are 140 standard color names. And if you're using WebStorm, it will automatically provide autocomplete for these names. So you can play around with this color names. You can hit, oh, I like light green, but I want it to be even lighter. Click shades, and then you can pick a lighter one, and it will give you the RGB you need to use or the hex value you need to use. So whichever one looks clear to you. If you're used to the hex value, these first two characters are the red value, so E9 is 233. FC is the green value, so FC represents 252, so hexadecimal. And E9, it represents the blue value, and that is 233. You can see E9, FC, E9. So here we can test out a bunch of different colors. We can change the shade. We can look at how white text and black text looks on there. So if we want white text to look better, then we should change it to a darker background. So we see white text shows up better when these values are lower. So lower value will give you darker values. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 will be black, and as you go higher up, all the way up to all Fs, which is, if we click on it, we can see that's all 255, 255, 255. That's pure white. So colors range from 0, 0, 0 to pure white of the FF, FF, FF. CSS3 also lets you do the hue, saturation, lightness. We're not going to go over that. So in addition to this, the color picker from W3 Schools, we can go to, if we want a whole theme of colors, Adobe Cooler lets you, pick colors that go well together. So one good option is to use the triad, and you can select a base color here. So to select a base color, you can just move this around, or you can paste your hex value in there, your RGB values in there, and you can pick a base color for your website. So let's say you want to do like a salmon theme. So as a salmon theme, we could have these color blue links. We could have, background with, this greenish color and this maroonish color. All these colors go well together in a web page. You can explore other custom themes that people already made and see what you like here. And then you can, if you like this, click on the info here, and then you can see a full screen of it. And where's the, and you can click edit and it'll let you see all the hex values here. That's a good way to find entire themes of colors for your website, or just one color as well. In CSS3, you can specify the opacity, which is basically the translucency of your color. So if you want your color to be somewhat see-through, you can pass an RGBA property to your CSS, and what that stands for is red, green, blue, alpha. So alpha transparency lets you specify a value between 0 and 1. 1 meaning the value is opaque, so you can't see through it. But 0 meaning it's fully transparent, which means the color won't even show. It'll just be an invisible background, so that whatever's behind it will show through. And you can do any range between there. So if you see those modal dialogues that pop up on your website, on a website that stop you from seeing the rest of the page, it might like blur out the background or like darken it slightly. Chances are either using RGBA color to overlay on top of the rest of the page, and using a value like 0.4. My computer's frozen right now, so hold on one second. See if it recovers. Hopefully you can still hear me. Just give it a minute. I need to clean something out. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay. Screen is gone. All right. Popping it back out. I've retained control of my... Okay. There you go. Okay. Any other questions, or was that just screen is gone? The back, could you guys hear me talking about RGBA? Let's cover it again briefly. RGBA. Okay, audio is fine. Good. So the whole time I was just pointing here because my screen was frozen. All right. So next step. So images. So we can use images in the background as well. So images are good for hero images, useful for patterns, for if you wanted to repeat images. You can fake gradients with repeated images. You can show an image once instead of repeating it. So by default, it's going to repeat the image vertically and horizontally for you, so in columns and rows. But you can specify it to not repeat, only show it once with this CSS property. And then you can position the background with the background position, and then you can size it with background size, which is in CSS3. So all this is very useful. Let's pull it up. So background images down here. We can play with it here. Let's go to the desert. This is a bad example of a background. It's hard to read the hello world text in this background. So let's actually go back. This was the poor example. Below is an example of a bad combination of text and background image because the text is hardly readable. So we want to be able to read our text. So this paper background is a little better. So here we're just specifying the background image as a file by saying URL paper.gif. So the whole body is going to have this paper.gif. But this paper is just a small piece. It is repeating itself. So if we turn background repeat off, look here, just need background repeat, no repeat. Background repeat, no repeats. We run it. We see the background image is actually just this small image here. But since it was repeating itself, it filled the entire area. So we could use this background size property to, now that we have our image set, we can set background repeat, no repeat, and we can set a background size explicitly. So this height and width, check here. So it has the length, which is the width, and the second value is the height. So it would be 60 pixels wide, 120 pixels tall. Or if we go to this flower example here, we see it's going to be 80 pixels wide and 60 pixels tall. It's going to be no repeat, and it's right here, this background image right there. Now they also have the original image in here, which we can delete. But the original image has a width of 224 and a height of 162. So we can shrink down and customize based on this background image, background size property. Now we also have the option of doing some keywords in here. So if you see background size cover, then it'll fill up the image to the entire background. Also contain, which I don't find as useful. It just makes sure that the image does not exceed the bounds of the div, but it will be its full size. So if we go into developer mode and we shorten this screen, we can see that flower, it'll shrink as the div shrinks. So using this button, by the way, is and switching this to responsive is a better way to test out your responsive site, test out how things change, rather than manipulating your entire browser window. Because when you try to resize your browser window, your tabs shrink, and it's just annoying. The tabs, especially, they just become little mountains. You have a mountain range here. If you're like me, then you have a bunch of tabs open. You need to purge the tabs every now and then. This responsive window makes it a lot easier. The only problem is then you have this console here, but you can break this out into, it doesn't have to be docked. You can put this in a separate window, and it will not It'll not affect the rendering of the page here. So you can still use it as responsive and still have access to your full screen. And then you see it still interacts with this page. And if we close it, then we go out of developer mode. Little nugget for you. Okay. So let's see, making a hero image using background. So again, you did this in your first project, but you may not have known exactly what you're doing. So we're going to take a little bit deeper to, to go into particularities of this. So we're going to reuse this app.js and app.css app header, and we're going to extend the header a little bit, be 300 pixels instead of 150 pixels. If we check it out, closing these up. If we check our React app here, then we see it's 300 pixels now instead of 150 pixels. And we want to set an image as a background here. Let's go ahead and go find a good hero image. So we're going to literally look for hero image. And then go to images. And see what we find. We get some Supermans. Every aspiring champion. We get this stock photo of a seemingly happy couple. Let's just grab one. Let's grab this one. Looks pretty hero images. Images-ish. All right, we're going to open this up. We're going to view image. And here we have a couple options. We can either copy the URL and use the URL as provided. But if we want to make sure this image always exists, then we have to pull it into our site. Since this is for educational purposes, we're just going to steal whatever we want. And then we're going to go into our project folder, and we're going to put the image directly into our source folder, our src folder. And we'll just call it hero.jpg. So go back to WebStorm. Now we see our hero.jpg in here. And it is red because it's not checked into source control yet. We could add it by going to git and then add if we wanted to, or we could do the git add in the terminal. That was weird. Okay, so we can add it, and then it'll show up as green, meaning it's staged but not committed yet. There were changes made, but they're not committed to our repository yet. You want all your files ultimately to be just straight black, which means that all changes, all new files, everything is inside your Git repository. If you want to continue using Git through the context menu here, you could go to Git and then commit directory as well. And that'll do the commit for you. And then use repository push. But I mean, this is a lot of nested commands you have to do when you could just use the command line in a more clear fashion. Okay. Rant over. So inside of our app header, we have this background color of 222. So this is a shortening of 020202, which is basically black. Go back over React app. So we're going to set that image as a background here. So we're going to set background image URL, and in parentheses, we're going to put our URL. We're going to put our string in here and use // to represent the current directory, and then hero.jpg. And we'll see WebStorm will do autocomplete for us, so we're just going to press enter once we see that hero.jpg highlighted, and semicolon at the end. Save that, go over here, and we see our hero image. But this is repeating, and we don't want it to repeat. We want this to fill up the entire space. So we're going to use background size name. Or sorry, we're going to do background size cover. Now we see a cool hero image here. It actually looks cooler than I thought it was going to look. Didn't even anticipate that. Background, repeat. We can set this to no repeat, even though we have so having this no repeat is kind of overkill because we already have cover. So the one image is going to fill up the entire background, but we might as well have no repeat in there as well. Now we have a cool hero image. We can make it adjust based on the page size. So right now, if we go to our developer tools and we turn on the responsive style, if we resize this, we can see our hero image, is adjusting its size. So when we're on smaller screens, you'll see the bigger Superman silhouette. And as you increase the width of the browser, it'll stretch the width and height of the image, the background image, but it won't affect the background image doesn't affect the size of the page. It's still going to be 300 pixels tall. So let's adjust the height of that background image based on the height of our window. So that's like the window size is called the viewport. So we're going to adjust that image based on the viewport, and we can do that with the viewport height property. Let's get back into WebStorm. Instead of saying 300 pixels, we're going to give it a value between 0 and 100 for the viewport height. So we're going to say we want this hero image should always be 50% of viewport height. So we'll say 50 VH and save. Now, whenever we adjust the height, we're adjusting the height of the hero image as well. Now, the problem is, as you see, once we get too low, then we were covering up elements of the header. So in order to stop that from happening, we can set a min height on here as well. Say 50 VH, but we really want it to be at least 250 pixels, or 150 pixels was the original. Let's go with that. So now it won't go below 150 pixels, but it'll go above it no problem. So we're going to have a minimum of 150 pixels regardless of the viewport height. But if the half the viewport height would be larger than 150 pixels, then we'll use that instead. If you're going to use images professionally, then yeah, make sure you have rights to use the image. This image I don't have the rights to use this at all in a commercial product, but education-wise, you can get away with a lot of stuff. Just make sure you cite your sources. So this hero image is coming from iChurch OKA. Give them a shout out, whatever these people are. Yeah, look how they use it as a hero image. So they are using their hero.jpg as a hero image for a page about heroes. So we went ahead and ripped this straight from this iChurch OKA holding out for a hero site. So there's my citation. Okay. Next up. So you can use multiple images in as background too. This is a little this CSS3. This gets a little tricky here. I'm not going to require it for this class, but if you're interested in having multiple images on your background, you can use multiple images on the background. So you would, for the background image, you would just separate each image by comma. You can have as many as you want here. We have 2 here, so we have a flower and the paper. Let's try it yourself. It's always best to just jump right in. And then we're specifying the flower will be on the right bottom of the page. We're setting the background position to right bottom. and we're saying the paper will be in the left top. So the paper is going to start at the left top, and the flower is not going to repeat, but the paper is going to repeat in both X and Y. We could say just repeat X if we wanted, and I'll just do a line of paper at the top, or we could say repeat Y to get a line of paper on the left side. And then we could switch, we could put it on the right side. Gives an interesting effect. It makes the text completely terrible. But we could increase the padding, right, to accommodate that text, or accommodate those backgrounds. So we can make sure this text is always going to be to the right of those images. And this actually looks pretty good. I don't know. Just throwing stuff out there. Basically, all the separate images will be indicated by their position in this list, and then you use the same comma separation to specify the values for each individual image. This gets a little tricky. In the past, this is CSS3, so you need CSS3 support. Let's see what the support is. Right here. So background image with multiple backgrounds is supported in IE 9 and above, and then all the other sensible browsers in the lower version. IE is going to give you the biggest trouble with any of these CSS3 things, because generally people that are using IE are enterprise users, and they're actually stuck on older versions of IE, including IE 8 or IE 7. If you're working in an enterprise environment, then you don't get to use some of this fun CSS3 stuff. But it does exist. You can separate the images by commas, or you can set the whole background using this shortcut background. So the background shorthand property just lets you specify the image position, the repeat, and can specify a color as well, all in one line, as opposed to putting it into separate lines. I recommend using this way until you're familiar with all the different pieces of the background you can manipulate, and then you can move on to shorthand property once you understand what's going on. CSS3 also has gradients. Just makes it look more modern. The gradient backgrounds, have been around forever, but in the past they were handled with an image that would be like 1 pixel wide, all the way down to however tall you want to make your background, and then just repeat it to the X. But now CSS3 has a built-in way to build gradients, which is great because that's such a common thing, and manipulating in an image editor is annoying. So if you want to use a background gradient, you can use these options. So you can specify angles, you can do multiple color stops, you can do a whole rainbow, you can add transparency, you can do this repeating. However you want to use these, you can try them out. Less is more with HTML. So this really subtle gradient is actually really great. Otherwise, you start looking like you're building a page from like the 1990s or something, when people were really experimenting with HTML and having wacky styles. But it's fun. If you want to try any of these out, go try it yourself. And we can change red to yellow to red to blue. You can see here, you can still have a background color of red for browsers that do not support gradients. So it'll fall back to a usable state for Internet Explorer 4.10 and Explorer 9. It'll just have a solid red background. Just throw that bone to the browsers that don't support this. You see, we can specify the background many times in here. Whatever the last one is will override all the ones before it. But if the browser doesn't support the last one, then it'll fall back to a supported value. So it'll move up the list until it finds a value that it supports. All right, so that's today's class. If you have any questions, please hit me up on Slack. Project Part 2 due date is this Friday. Don't forget. I hope you have a happy 4th of July tomorrow. If you have any questions, again, hit me up on Slack. All right, bye. Thanks for watching.